What's up, Tyler? Oh, Tyler is not joining us today. I already knew that. Yeah, today we have David Wintzer from Mark Wintzer Construction. I'm actually really stoked to chat with him. He's been doing content on Instagram for what I find out to be is a year. I had definitely thought he was doing it for longer, and I thought he was in the building industry for longer. He's been in the building industry for 5 years, and he's been sharing his knowledge as he learns it. And it's a great example of a collaborator. But dude, we're dudes, dudettes. We jump right into some hard hitting conversation about hiring, firing, retaining employees. But then we get into just what is wrong with the construction industry, and what he thinks and what I think is the path forward. Really good conversation. So make sure you stick around. And yeah, this podcast is brought to you by Andersen Windows. Andersen is dedicated to designing and manufacturing products that are strong, reliable, and ready to perform. And they validate that by testing and testing and testing again until they know their windows and doors perform to their high standards. They take the time to validate the performance of their materials as well as the performance of fully assembled products. They test their products to failure, not to just pass, meaning that they test beyond the threshold required by the industry because they want to know that they are supplying a product that will perform in the most extreme conditions. If products withstand Andersen's best-in-class tests, you can be confident that they will withstand the test of time for you and your clients. Visit andersenwindows.com for more information. This podcast is also brought to you by Buildertrend. So for those who are longtime listeners, you've heard us talk about Buildertrend for, I don't know, over a year now. It's a name that is well known in the industry as a leading construction management platform for builders and remodelers. But if you tried them before and fell off the bandwagon, or if you think your current process has Buildertrend beat, so hear me out. They're worth giving it another try, and here's why. Their platform is new, improved, and better than ever. And here are just a few exciting new updates they announced at the International Builder Show. A materials rebates program with leading brands, an online integrated checking account with cashback rewards, new and better communication tools, enhanced estimating features, expanded invoice options, more platform integrations, and an improved online payment system. Schedule a free demo to see those updates in action by visiting buildertrend.com/MC demo. And lastly, guys, I got to give a plug to the Contractor Coalition Summit, May 15th through the 19th. Myself, Brad Levitt, Morgan Molitor, and then special guest Mark Williams, as well as Tyler Grace, are going to be in Minneapolis. Tickets are selling out. A bunch of you guys have signed up. Make sure you do register at contractorscoalitionsummit.com. We definitely need to get your ticket in. If you need flexible payment options, shoot me a DM on Instagram. I'm happy to help that out. But we have a jam-packed day, everything from an Andersen Windows facility tour. Thank you for them for being a sponsor, not only of the podcast, but of the summit. Then we have some home tours of local builders, a live podcast with Curious Builder, AFT, and Modern Craftsman. And then, of course, the jam-packed school session Friday, Saturday, and then wrapping it up on Sunday with breakfast and coffee chats. So, contractorscoalitionsummit.com. Hope to see you guys there. All righty. What's going on?
Not much, man. Busy day. A lot of concrete pours today.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Why? How many are you building?
We got 5 going right now.
Oh, shit.
So, yeah, we've had a tough, long winter. So today's like one of the first sunny days we've had in weeks. Like we pushed this concrete pour 4 times.
Oh, no shit.
So, but yeah, you know the deal.
I do. Where are you guys out of again?
Park City, Utah.
Oh, you are in Park City.
Mm-hmm.
I knew you were in Utah. I didn't realize it was in Park City.
Yeah,
I mean, you guys, was this year worse than last year?
No, last year was record breaking.
Yeah, it was brutal.
I mean, I think it was like 80 feet of snow we got. It was ridiculous. It was something. Yeah, it was like 900 inches or something.
We got 0.8 inches last year. So, and usually we get a lot of snow. Last few winters have been mild, and even this year we got snow and frost once, essentially. Like, and I
You only
mean,
got frost once?
yeah, like it was one time. I mean, it would freeze, but it would never. It didn't last for very long. And the only reason I knew it was one time is because it was, of course, when I went for my footing inspection, and
Yeah, right?
the inspector was like, you got frost down there." I'm like, "It's all ledge. We're gonna drill an epoxy." He goes, "Well, I can't see the ledge underneath the snow, so call me when it melts." And I'm like, "Okay."
What's your frost depth there?
4 feet.
Okay. Yeah, we're 42 inches. Yeah, same thing.
That seems, why wouldn't you be deeper than me?
Well, I was just thinking as you're talking, I was like, because I just feel like you guys get more frigid temperatures than us. But when you said you've only had one frost this year, then
Well,
because
usually that's unusual.
yeah, Utah doesn't get like crazy. Like we only have a few days in the single digits
Oh,
a
yeah,
year.
we could be
Um,
weeks.
yeah, I mean it's pretty rare that we get below zero here.
Mhm.
Like we'll get 100 feet of snow, but it'll stay 20 degrees the whole time.
Oh, yeah, and plus the snow blankets the ground, and
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I guess sometimes you just associate, like, frigid temperatures with snow, and the reality, it's actually no, it's kinda perfect between 0 and 30 degrees is when
Exactly.
where the
Yeah.
snow is.
That's when. Yeah, and especially with Utah, we get that really light, dry snow. We don't have a lot of moisture in it, so
Yeah.
it's it's that perfect temperature for sure.
So what's your role in the company?
So
Like,
I
what
own it. Yeah, I started it.
but what do you do every
I'm
day?
the owner of the company. What's that?
But I meant more like, what do you do every day? What
Oh
you
well, we're kind of in this transition period right now. We just let uh, a superintendent go,
Mhm.
and so and that was as of yesterday. So now I'm kind of like back in this field role. Like we're in the process of interviewing right now for some more supers. So I'm client relations, estimating, and then like a little bit of project management.
Yeah. So, why'd you end up letting go of the super?
It his skills. He, I mean, I guess we didn't vet him well enough, but like we come with the houses we're building are big high end structures,
Mhm.
and especially with these snow loads out here. So there's a lot of steel in these buildings, and there's a lot of shop drawings, a lot of review of technical steel. And he came from more like the production world, and which is just schedule driven and all wood and pretty cookie cutter. And we just started realizing that a lot of these details in these higher end homes we were doing, especially in the framing phases, were just kind of getting missed,
Mm.
and little things were getting ordered wrong, and it was just not. And we're a pretty small team. I mean, we're lean and mean, and so it was a key role that we needed someone strategic in. So we're like on our ninth interview in the last 2 days, and we're just kind of we got a headhunter working for us to trying to find the right person. But it's tough, man, finding that specific role.
Yeah. I mean, it's a question that comes up all the time, right? Like, everyone's like, "How are you finding people?" Everyone's struggling with people, and forever, it was always through social media for us,
Hmm.
and truthfully, we get a lot of inbound through social, but they're not it's not a qualified pool. It's a lot of
Yeah,
people that, "Hey, I love what you're doing. I wanna be part of it. I wanna come and learn." I'm like, "I would love to teach you, but I
yeah,
can't right now." Like,
exactly.
I need a bulldog to get shit done. And,
Yeah,
it's similar. Like, we have been essentially interviewing pretty consistently at least one person a week for, I'm gonna say, a year.
for a superintendent.
Just for any role. We have
Okay.
just, like, Julian's my head of operations here. We just basically decided, like, we need to always be interviewing people, because and just let people know where we're at. Like, "Hey, I'm not hiring right now, but we are going to stay in this constant, like, interview role, where, because if something changes or a project kicks off, we might need someone immediately." And, like, the position you're in, it's like you're interviewing 9 people in what did you say, 2 days?
Yeah,
That's brutal. And
that's brutal.
what happens is, like, a lot of times you react to, like, someone that kind of checks 8 out of 10 boxes, and, like, we
Hmm.
we just need them. Let's get them on board. Where we looked at it as, like, let's just interview people, let them know up front, so they're not wasting their time with us. But if they're interested in working with us, like, hey, and we feel the interest is mutual. It's like, all right, we'd like to pursue this. However, right now we're probably, 6 months away from actually being able to make a hire.
Yeah, and I mean, We made a mistake by the guy that we just let go. We made a mistake by hiring him too fast, and so yeah, we're definitely taking our time. And I had a conversation with the recruiter yesterday that's finding us this talent, and I was trying to explain to them like why these candidates were deficient, and they, like I was like, I don't want to like tell you guys your job, but I need to explain to you like what we really need and why it's so important that someone can read shop drawings. And they were thinking shop drawings were just the engineer's drawings. And I'm like, no,
Mhm,
I got to like, let me walk you through like, it has to be the specific thing because, yeah, like you said, I don't have time to teach someone that kind of stuff. And so some of these guys that they're great candidates, but I'm like, they're like, yeah, I'm sure I could learn it in like a month or two. And I'm like, well, I don't have time to teach you a month or two. Like, I need you to come in. I need you to teach me stuff.
mhm.
Because I'm not, I'm not from the world of construction, and so I need to be taught stuff too. If I'm having to teach you stuff, that means you don't. If I know more than you, sometimes in construction, is not a good thing.
Yeah. It's tough. Like, I think that, you know, I mean, a super's role is so critical to the success of a job, and specific to what you're talking about. It's like understanding the details and knowing how to execute on them. And, you know, it's something that, people feel as though like, hey, I can learn it. And,
Hmm.
you know, that might be the case. Like, hey, maybe you can learn how to read steel shop drawings, but you also need to be able to coordinate those with the framing and the mechanicals and understanding, what goes where. And not only that, but you also need to be proactively thinking about the project and how do I keep this job from having a dead day.
Yep.
And when you compound all that, it's like it becomes, kind of a daunting role. It's like I got to keep my foot on the gas and make sure I fully understand how to execute on this the
And
whole
stay
time.
ahead of that punch list, like really understanding that this vessel sink is going to be this height, and when that whatever the
Mhm.
fixture comes out, it's going to be 2 inches too tall. We got to drop this cabinet height down and make sure we rough in for that, rather than we learn that as we're installing the cabinet. We got to tear stuff out. Like that's just so there's so many things in that role. It's such a critical role, and it's tough to find the right person right now. At least for us, it is.
No, I think it's widespread. You know, I've talked about on this podcast a lot. Is like we had a lot of people leave, or we fired a lot of people last year, and or let people go. And it all stemmed down to the fact that like we needed people that were in this position that could understand at a higher level of like how to execute and how to stay ahead of these projects. It's tough. It's just hard. And when you get into the world of like you guys build some complicated stuff, and you start talking about steel, it's like it's a whole different world.
It really is.
It's
How
in
many employees do you guys have?
we're like 15 between the millwork and building.
Okay.
So we're still lean, like we're still pretty lean because there's a portion of those people that are strictly marketing. Then you have post construction team, and then you have the construction and pre construction team.
Yeah. I'm curious, as you were saying, like you're interviewing these people constantly. Are you are you finding as your social presence is growing, especially with your business page? Are you getting kind of, for lack of a better word, like fanboys coming in, or some people that are like just really excited for the opportunity to work with an organization that has a presence versus they're fully qualified and ready to step into the role?
Yeah, which is weird.
I bet.
Um, yeah, that's something I'm not totally like. I don't know how to say this appropriately. I find it weird because I'm not like that. Like even with like celebrity, like true celebrities. I don't think I'm a celebrity
Same.
by any means, right?
I'm
Uh,
the same.
but like when I see someone famous or like it's no different to me. Like
Same.
you're just a normal ass person. Like if I feel inclined to say hello to you, I will. If I have nothing to offer or don't feel like I'm not going to say hi. And
Yeah, I've never been one to go get a selfie or take pictures, and I don't know what that is either. But yeah, I'm the same way. It's just another person. And when people freak out over it, I'm like, they're just having dinner, man. Like, leave them
yeah.
alone.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm not interrupting someone's dinner by any means. Um, but for me, it's like, especially going to the trade shows, I don't wanna make this about me because I think I come off cocky and arrogant and, narcissistic enough sometimes, so I'm just adding fuel to that fire right now.
We all,
But when I go to these events or I speak, it's like I do it there's a handful of people like, listen, I wanna set the record clear, like, I appreciate the support, you know, immensely. Like the fact that like there's so many avid listeners and people watching our content and stuff. Like I really appreciate that. But it is funny when some of them kind of geek out over the fan from a fanboy perspective. It's like, dude, I'm just a regular guy. Like
And I think
I chose to put a camera in front of my face for 10 years, and it's, sure, like I think the social presence has added to, like, going back to your question, like from the hiring pool, there are, like, I have a few people in my inbox that are like, "Hey, I followed you for a long time. I love what you do. I love what you're for the industry. I'd love to come mentor under you, or I come work for you." And, I'm not qualified, and, you know, it's hard for me to progress that forward, not only from the skill set, but it's also like you probably have a false understanding of what construction really is, because what I share on social, though I try to be as honest as possible, there's some vanity to it. There's some makeup on what we do, because it's marketing.
yeah. And it's this tough realm because you have to respect the move as well as like someone is willing to say like, hey, I don't have much skill but I want to learn and I'm willing to
Totally.
like come in and that's a move that I wish I had, I mean, done earlier in my career, but before social media, like gone and knocked on a door and just said like,
Mhm.
hey, can I come intern for the summer and I'll work for free and like just learn stuff. Like it's definitely a move you got to respect, but at the same time, it's that fine line of like, yeah, like you said, you don't have time to train that person, you don't have time to hold their hand, and are they even really a fit for construction? And you don't have time to deal with that, and it's got to be frustrating, but also flattering at the same time.
Yeah, totally, totally flattering. I think, and I want to be in a position where I can train guys, bring on guys that are just genuinely interested. Because at the end of the day, it's harder to teach someone, the passion or the desire to do this than it is the technical side. But you have to start with that technical side, right? You have to have the core team to be able to dedicate time to educating someone that is in a more junior level, and growing up into the business. So, I certainly don't shy away from that. It just the structure needs to be there. Like
Hmm.
you need to have structure in your business. If David, you don't have the time to do it, then who's going to have the time? And it's like, until you have someone that is in that position to take the responsibility of actually doing the work, then they can consider, like, all right, now I'm going to mentor someone.
So back to that comment of structure, when you guys are doing these workshops and even in your own business, like what is the thing that you're saying is the biggest foundation that these guys got to get down for the structure of their business in order to grow?
What do you mean?
Like from the foundational standpoint, is it
Mm.
getting the right team in place? Is it getting the finances in place? Is it getting
You're
the
saying as
systems
another
and the
business?
operations? Yeah,
Uh,
like when you guys are out there giving the workshops and someone's
oh,
starting at eight,
yeah.
yeah, when you're saying like, hey, if you're going to be successful, you got to rewind the clock and we got to start with X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, I think, I mean, you hear everyone talk about it. It's like you got to have processes in place. You have to have systems in place. I think you got to be dialed. Like, understand your profitability. Like, there's so many buzzwords that go around into, like, you got to do this before you start a business. But the reality is, like, you got to understand that as you hire people, they need a clear understanding of what their job description is, like what their
Hmm.
responsibilities are. And the hard part of that I have found, that is, sometimes you put so much emphasis on that now they have like they have
Yeah.
bumpers up. And it's like, well, no, I need you to dip into that lane. It's like, nope, my job description says this. It's like, sure, you're not in a 5,000 person company, you're in a 5-person company. So
Hmm.
when the labor doesn't show up and the street's dirty, like, sweep the street. Like, that's not how this rolls. And that, I think, that's the most difficult part. And it's this, like, whole HR, like, function of our businesses, where it's like we get frustrated with people because we try to be clear and in terms of what our expectations are, but you have to have a little gray area, and then the gray area becomes where they hang out, and then it's like they're not doing anything.
Yeah.
And we had a couple people last year where it's like it got to a point where the when I would, like, the expectation had to be so clearly communicated. Like, explicit direction as to what to do. And I was like, "This is point like, I
Yeah.
want to think that this is worth it, like, I will explain to you, like, here's step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then when you hear that, you know the next time you go to do something similar, like, you have to do the same 10 steps, and then we'd get to that point where it's like, "Alright, now that person should know," like, it's like, "What do I do?" It's like, "Well, here, remember step
Yeah.
1 and step 2 and
But
step
then
3?"
they
It's
get to
like
step 10 and they've completed everything and they're like, "Now what?" And you're like, "Well, you can't you've gone all the way through here and you can't think of 11, 12, and 13?" Like
it's
there's, like I
yeah.
understand your job is done and you've completed task A, B, and C, but how about you think of what the other tasks can be? Like you said, go sweep the street. Like we're waiting for a delivery. It's late. What can you do for the next 45 minutes to keep yourself occupied rather than
Right.
check off every box and say, well, I did it all?
Yeah.
And you can't teach that. It's kind of that entrepreneur mindset of like, how can
Mhm.
I provide value to this company outside of my job description? But it's rare to find.
Very
It's hard.
rare.
I mean, you have 15 employees. I only got four of us, and so I can only
Mhm.
imagine how many personalities you're managing. And um, how long are you guys waiting before you realize that this person's not the person?
Oh, we could spend 2 hours talking about this, and we might. Um, Typically not fast enough. I am yeah, I'm definitely someone that gives people the benefit of the doubt, and, I've the whole extreme ownership mentality, like Jocko's book, and, like, I've definitely adopted that into how, especially how I run my business. Um, and sometimes to my own detriment, where I'm like, nope, it's not them, it's me. I failed them. I didn't communicate this role, appropriately, and I need to before I just fire them for not performing. I need to step up and redefine what their job description is. And what's interesting is most of the time when that happens, I go and read the job description that I had sent them in the offer letter, and I'm like, "No, it's actually clearly states the 10 things that they're supposed to be responsible for, and they're not doing any of them."
Mm-hmm.
So and so then I get into this, like, mindset. I'm like, "What the fuck am I like, why, why aren't they doing it?" And then but then I go into, like, "Well, you know what? I derailed them. I had them do this special project, and next thing I
Yeah.
know, like, they're no longer on the same path, so it's my job to bring them back." Or I it's or I haven't had the sit down, the one-on-one. I really need to document this as, like, "Hey, we need to be better. Here's how we work." And and truthfully, I did that last year. I had done a formal performance improvement plan, PIP plan, for those that know, and ultimately both guys quit on me, which was it. Looking back at it, like, it was my way of trying to. It was my last ditch effort, essentially, to keep someone on board. I was like, they're not like, I'm trying to communicate, like, my expectations, and I'm not doing a good job. So the only way I can do this is if I spell out in a formal plan. And
Yep.
for me, like, truthfully, I actually never knew what a PIP plan was. And someone in my Builder 20 was like, "Oh, that's a perfect use for a PIP plan." I'm like, "What's a PIP plan?" They're like, "A performance improvement plan." I'm like, "That sounds great." And then when
Yeah.
I pitched it, it was like I had basically written their death sentence. I was like, "No, no, this isn't bad." And they're like, "Yes, it is. This is basically, if I don't do this, I get fired." And I was like, "Well, technically the handbook says that. Like, if you don't do your job, you get fired." So this is just like my way of saying, "Hey, you're doing a good job. These are the things that would make you be great."
Mm-hmm.
And so, ultimately, like I said, it was more my opportunity to say, "Hey, here's where we need to work together to be better." And you know I could say it backfired, or maybe it did exactly what it needed to do, and just made those guys moved on, and I looked internally and said, all right, well, you know they weren't the right fit, and that's not on them. That's, if anything, on me. I should have seen the writing on the wall and realized that, hey, maybe our company's outpacing their growth, or maybe
Yep.
or maybe our goal as a business has now come misaligned with what their goal is. individually.
Yeah, I mean, there's always that element of growth, and they may not be part of it. I went to a Hermosi event in Vegas, and he was talking, and it hit perfectly as I was like, about to let this person go, and um, but they had two things that struck to me, and like, he's like, depending on what kind of company you're trying to build, like if you're trying to build the next Apple or
Hmm.
Tesla or NS Builders, whatever your standard is and what you want to grow to, you know, would Nick put up with Sarah? Would Elon Musk put up with Sarah? Would
Hmm.
Jeff Bezos put up with Sarah? And if they're not going to put up with Sarah, then why would you?
Hmm.
And that really struck me. And then the other one was, he said, if you don't know in 2 weeks if this is the guy, then they're not the guy. And
But the
as
like,
I've been going through these interview processes, that's all I can think. Like, when I get off the phone with someone, if I don't have a feeling like I'm ready to talk to this guy again and see what else he has to deliver, then immediately I say no. Like, and we've said no to a bunch of people because if they don't strike me as someone, and I hate to say like I'm not, sometimes people don't interview well the first time,
mhm.
but I don't know necessarily what I'm looking for, but they have to have that it factor for me that strikes. And yeah, so if you don't know in 2 weeks if they're the guy, then they're not the guy.
Shit.
I know it was daunting to me because I put up with people for years, before I'm
Don't
like,
you
all right, you
hate
got to
that?
go.
Like, when you hear that and then you go back in your, like, memory and you're like, "Oh my god, I remember that 2 weeks of that guy," and, like, he ended up being a nightmare, and I knew it right away.
And you put up with it because you're in a tough time in the business. Well, we got to finish the closeout with this house. Like we
It's
need him for
always
another
that.
month
It's
or two.
always that. "Give me
Yeah,
another
like
month.
no,
Give me another month. Don't let him know yet." Yeah,
and they've been on that project longer than anybody else, so
yeah,
they kind of do need to carry it along because it'd be tougher to bring someone else in and like say, hey, we're just putting cabinets in and we need
yeah.
you to finish out this project and you know nothing about it. Like
And then you
it's
and then you fire him, and then you hire someone new, and they step in, they bang out the job faster than it was originally scheduled to be done.
it's
It's like, "Wait, what?"
I know. Entrepreneurship's tough game, man, for sure.
How was the Hormozy event?
It was fun. So it was kind of this like little secret event that they were hosting that a friend of mine went on to like I don't know if you've ever been on their website at Acquisition,
Yeah.
but you can see if you qualify to be part of their business. So my buddy went on there and when you got to the very end, it was like a single sentence and it said, "We're hosting an event for 50 people. Let us know if you want to be a part of it." And
Mhm.
he sent it to me. He's like, "Dude, you got to go." And I'm right next to Vegas, and it was 50 people, and it was in their brand new headquarters,
Yep.
and it was like one on one with it. It was really cool. It was one on with their entire team. So like they brought their social media manager out. They brought their marketing manager, the director of ops, the CFO, Layla, Alex, and they
Mhm.
each individually kind of walked through the segments of the business and what they look for in buying businesses. And then they did breakout groups, and you could ask, their social media manager, what do you guys do? Their video editor, what do you do? And so it was kind of just this really meet the team type thing. And what they were doing is they found that anyone that they had invested in the past had come to them at some point prior time and was like, hey, like, how can I get better? And they're like, oh, do these 5 things. And they came back a year later, like, wow, I went from 1 million to 10 million. And
Yeah.
they're like, great, we'll invest in you. And so they're like, we're trying to give you guys really cheap advice. And it was a cheap event. It was like 3 grand.
Wow.
And they were like, we're just trying to give people cheap advice and with the hopes that one of you will come back one day and we'll invest in you. And so it was kind of just this like, once again, the Hormozy method of just give it all away for free almost.
Mhm.
And it was a really cool event. It was neat to apply it to the construction world and see. And a lot of Layla's presentation was all on hiring people. And so it just hit
Right.
home for me perfectly.
Yeah, they're such a dynamic duo when it comes like, forget the relationship side of it is just a bonus, in
Yeah,
my opinion. Like, the fact that, like, the way they play off each other from a business perspective is just inspiring from that side of it. And I think, like, I watch a ton of their stuff, and a bunch of my buddies and I, we send the Hermosi stuff back and forth constantly. It's like, did you see what he said about this? I'm like, dude, I've been saying that. It's like, he's very intelligent and very, very well spoken. But Layla, the employee side, like, I've learned a lot from her, from just, like,
for sure.
dealing with employees, provide like, giving feedback, and, she's just a shark when it comes to that, and just, like,
She's super sharp.
understands
I
it.
mean,
Yeah.
she's the day to day running that operation when she's standing there, and it was really cool to kind of like hear the behind the scenes. No one that's ever been on the camera, the CFO, the
Mm,
CO, all these individuals that like are basically the backbone of the company running the operation, where Alex and Layla are the face. Obviously Layla's running it and they have a lot of say
yeah.
in it, but just these individuals that are, they're sifting through hundreds of applications of all these businesses that they may or may not invest in,
Mhm,
and just hearing their take on how Layla handles people and how they get these individuals in and out quick, and just the interview questions. I mean, I had 2 pages of notes of like just ways to interview someone, and here's a red flag. If you, the biggest one that stuck out for me is at the very end of the interview. Do you have any questions for me? And if someone says no, they're done.
really.
Like she
What's
was
the
like,
reasoning for it though? Like,
she
why?
says if no one will take the time to investigate a little bit about our business or understand how we operate, or how what we do might affect them, or how what they do could affect us, and have a little bit of, introspective thought process into what this organization does, and have just one question about it, she's like, then they're not the person. They're not thinking deep enough for the type of person that we need in this organization. And
Mm,
it's kind of been true. And like, it's kind of my test as I'm interviewing these people. At the very end, I go, do you have any questions for me? And I just like wait. And most people do actually, but I'd say like, yeah, 20% of them are like, no. And I kind of just cross them off the list right there. I'm like, I'm just taking the Layla method. But I agree with it. If you're not going to take the time to like even just do a little Google research and say like, well, I
mm.
like what you guys are doing, but why this? Or, well, even like, what are my hours going to be? Like, what a
Yeah,
simple
right.
question,
Yeah,
just want to know one thing about the company.
yeah,
Yeah, I think it shows lack of um, initiation, if you will.
yeah. Yeah, it's fun. Like, as you're saying that, I'm like envisioning you at your desk, and they say no, and you just like physically cross their name off as they're getting up
Yeah,
from the from the desk.
just hang up on the phone.
It's like, nope. Um, no, that's good. I mean, I think our structure is we're not as structured with the interviews as I'd like to be. We are far more structured than we used to be. I used to interview people, and if we would get coffee, and I'm like, oh, he seems cool. And I'd be like, "Go
Yeah,
ahead." And then my team would be like, "Nick, what the fuck are you doing?" I'm like, "Well, he seems good." It's like, "No, he's not. Like, he doesn't know anything." So, I mean, that was a couple years ago, but now it's structured where it's like it goes, Julian runs operations. So they meet with Julian first and he does the sniff test. If we're good, then it goes to me. And then we meet with them together in person, ask a bunch of questions. And, truthfully, like we want to know if they have questions for us. Um, but I don't know. I couldn't tell you how many people say yes or no. So now, I mean,
hmm
now I'll just steal
yeah.
that from you. I'm just gonna be like,
Well, I
no,
stole from Layla, so
yeah,
we're
like
stealing from
no.
the same.
Um, and I'm sure people are listening to this, be like, no, what if you truly answered all their questions and they truly don't have a single question? It's like, well, maybe I say no and maybe they were a good hire. I'll never know because
Yeah,
it's,
well,
it's
I did have someone the other day. I said, "Do you have any questions for me?" And he goes, honestly, he goes, "I think you guys have, done a good job." And he goes, "I don't have any questions at this time, but if I make it to the second round of interview, I'm sure I'll come up with a bunch of questions." And that was enough for me. Like, all right, like
yeah,
you realize, like, all right, if we get further in the weeds in this, like you're really gonna want to know some stuff.
yeah, that's fair.
So yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess I'm being a little hard on people now I'm saying it out loud.
No, but I mean, Uh, you know what? I was just on a call before this podcast with a coach I'm working with, and we were talking about this problem. So like I'm actually glad we're talking about hiring and firing and interviewing. And we were talking, he's like, catch me up, like what's going on with people, like how all these quote unquote issues you've been having. And I was like, what it came down to is that, selfishly, this is my business. And selfishly, I just don't wanna work with people I don't like, and that's it. Like, I
Yeah,
and that, and I know, like, that can be harsh, but at the same time, it's like, but why would they wanna work with me if I don't like them?
yeah,
And I played that out, and of course, it's way easier said than done, or at least for me, where it's like I still struggle to kind of enforce, like, "Hey, you're not doing your job. You need to be better," and really understand when, like, am I providing enough feedback or am I not? And, it gets to a point where, you know, most of the time it gets to a point where it's like you wanna fire them or you wanna let someone go, and what happens is they end up leaving. And it's because they're frustrated with the business. It's like, you're frustrated with the business because I've been trying to fire you for 6 months and I've been giving you the cold shoulder because I haven't had the balls to do it.
Yeah, I've done
Eh,
that.
yeah, and what happens there, it's like, man, like, I wanted to fire you, you're quitting, which is good because I needed to get rid of you, but now you just flipped the role and now you're in control and I'm not prepared, where I could have been prepared saying like, "Hey, I'm gonna let you go," and have had a plan to replace you.
Yeah, it's that fine line. But like you said, I mean, if you don't want to work with them, then the odds are, if you don't like them, some odds are someone in your organization doesn't like them either. Because
Yeah.
if you're working around people that are like minded with you and you guys all get along, then
Mhm.
that person might be the thing in the organization. And what I took away from that conference the most was like, if you really want to build a business that's going to last the test of time. And it may not be a $200 million business. It may
Mhm.
be a $10 million business that lasts for 20 years. That's fine. But like, if you really want a business that's going to grow, nothing will make a bigger impact than the people that you
Yeah.
allow to come into that organization and have a role that can impact it. And I really took something out of that of just like, okay, I need to be really selective. And the people that aren't pulling their weight, they have to go because, like you said, this is my business and I have to be selfish because at the end of the day, this is how you feed your family. This is your name. Like
Mhm.
you got to do what's right for the business. At the end of the day, this is a living, breathing thing, and if you don't feed it the right stuff, it's gonna die.
Yeah. I mean, I only know this industry, but it's like it's the hardest part is the people. And it's just like, and dealing, like you said earlier, like dealing with personalities and knowing, who's a good fit. And Alex saying that, if you don't feel like they're the good fit in the first 2 weeks, chances are you're right. So you got to get rid of them. And I mean, that has always been the case.
Hmm.
And it's, and what I think we don't give ourselves enough credit to is, like, well, they have a family and they have bills. It's like, sure, there's a place for them somewhere else. And I
Hmm.
think that we forget that. It's like, we think that, we're gonna fire someone or let someone go and they're gonna be on the street. And the reality is
Yeah,
they're gonna be upset, maybe pissed off, turn around, and they're gonna go apply to the next guy and they'll end up at another company.
yeah.
And we've
But
had
that
it.
person could bring you down, and you can't just start another company.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
I heard you speaking on Mike Rowe's podcast of talking about just as we're talking about just individuals in this industry and how I think you said it was for in the next 50 years, every 5 people that retire, one will replace them. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that was the study I found.
So, I mean, what do you think is the main issue behind? I mean, I understand technology and the younger generation doesn't want to be a part of it, but why is it that the individuals that are in this industry currently aren't willing to help grow this industry, in your opinion?
Because they've been beating the shit out of for 50 years.
Fair
Think about
enough.
I mean, like, that's it. Think about the guys that, this is one of the issues I have with our industry, and this is related to your question, is that as a builder, there's a lot of contractors that will get a job, they'll sell it at a premium, and then they turn around and then they go and beat up every trade to figure out how cheap they can do it.
Hmm.
And what happens is that, hey, Mr. Painter, it's like, you know, you know, yeah, as a contractor, I sold this job. I'm a luxury contractor. I'm going to make, 30% on the job, blah, blah, blah. Hey, Mr. Painter, like, I need you to do this. I need you to do me a solid. You gotta cut your costs on this. And we beat the shit out of that contractor to do it for maybe no profit or for very little profit. Don't worry, I'll get you on the next one. Well, what if the next one doesn't show up?
Yep.
Now this guy's got no nest egg, no protection, no profit. Like, he's barely making it because, this guy and the other contractors he's working with just beats him up every time they go to do a project. And it's all the way down to the employee of that painting company. I'm using painting company as an example. But like, then the employees are like, "Well, why don't I have benefits?" It's like, we can't afford benefits. It's like, and this is as much as I can pay you per hour. It's because, like, we're not making enough, and it trickles down to that. So the guy that's, that guy, like, why is he going to want to train someone else when he's barely making enough money to cover his at home expenses, or then the painter is barely making enough money on the job because every contractor they work with, beats him up on the price. And it's the same reason why a lot of these guys end up doing shit work. is because they get in like, there's not a majority, but there's a percentage of these guys that get into it because they truly love the craft, right?
Yep.
Whatever the trade might be. Say it's tile. These guys get into it because they love doing tile. And then they start the company, and then it's like, hey, can you just like, we got to do that a little bit less expensive. You do that on one job, two, three, 20 jobs later, you're basically like scraping by because you're making less and less money on these jobs because it's just constant, you're constantly being beaten up. And then you go work for a contractor that cares about quality over anything else. Don't worry about the price. They're not accustomed to that. They're going to go in there and get it done as quickly as possible. I've talked about this in my own experience. It's like they're going to come in, get it done as quickly as possible because they priced it based on the fact that they've been doing it for a few years, based on at a low margin. So they have to spread around and do 2-3 jobs in a day in order to cover their expenses. So to your question, like, why don't they want to help, just like sustain this industry or keep people interested in this industry? Because they don't have the bandwidth. They don't have the opportunity to coach these kids. And sure, there's guys out there that do, but the majority of them don't because they don't have the financial means or the bandwidth or just the desire to do it because they're so, you know they're so um beaten down of being in this industry and never really fulfilling what they got into this industry for.
It's it's the most unique industry I've ever come across. It is something that it's so necessary and so fucked up as an industry that, like, to kind of piggyback onto what you're saying is like, I have a lot of theory too on why this industry is so jacked. And like, so to your point, like, yeah, these guys are getting beat down, beat down, beat down. And then their guys are like, oh, can I get benefits? Can I get a raise? No, dude, I'm
No.
just getting, my margins are squeezed. I got nothing for you. But the guys that are at the bottom of the totem pole, they see that, Nick's painting company is, Nick got a new truck, and they see that Nick's building, painting $1 million homes. They don't realize that Nick's making no profit on it or this or that, or
Mhm.
what Nick's going through in the evenings with the taxes and the bids and just all the phone calls, the rework, whatever it is. And they're like, well, shoot, dude, I'm making 50 grand a year. Nick's making 300 grand a year. I can do what Nick does. I can paint a whole house, and they do it.
Mhm.
They can frame a whole house. They know how to build a house A to Z. Like, technically speaking, they know how to do it, but they don't know how to run a business.
Mhm.
So then they go off on their own, and that cycle starts all over. So they go off on their own, and yeah, they win a couple jobs. They know how to frame the job. They're going through it, and then all of a sudden, billing comes. They're like, oh my god, I didn't account for nails. I didn't account for the hangers. I didn't, I didn't realize that my guys are gonna be working Saturdays and get overtime to get that schedule. Holy shit! Like, and now all of a sudden, they didn't make any money on that job. So now they're reeling, and then it's the same vicious cycle. The GC's beating them up. They're running their business inefficiently. Their guys are, and then it's just this cycle of no one knows what the fuck they're doing out in this industry, and it's really scary.
And now pair that with the homes getting bigger and more complex.
Yep. And the um what's the word I'm looking for? Just like the excitement factor of like, oh my gosh, like we just did this remodel on X Street. Now we can do this new custom build on Y Street. Oh, like, wow, everybody wants to be in that neighborhood. Like, dude, a $2 million
Mhm.
home, like, that's, we dreamed of building a $2 million home. And then, yeah, you're right. Now it's a 5 and 10 and but all the way back to what we were talking about, that foundation and getting your business right. A lot of people don't take the time to do it. They just keep kicking that can down the road, and
Mhm.
all of a sudden they just have bigger and bigger problems. And then all of a sudden they just don't show up because they can't pay their bills.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that from the real estate side of it and like the actual homes, it's, there's this push to be bigger. It's like cost per square foot or how many square feet the home is based on like that's what's driving the value. How many bathroom, like all of these like things are driving the value. Think of the way they comp a project. We're doing a spec right now and like the comp was a joke. Like when well, the comp process was a joke. It's like, here's your comps. It's like that house is nothing like what we're building.
Hmm.
It's like it's the same size, same bedroom, same car, 3-car garage. I'm like, that's it. Like that,
Yeah.
that
That's
is
your
not
comp.
that. It's not, that's not a comp. And they're like, well, that's how this works. And so, that's a challenge in itself. So now you have the pressure of that where it's like, these homes are getting bigger and more grand. And then when they get big and grand, and you're driving the labor force cost down, now fictitiously you can build a 10,000 square foot house for $2 million. It's like a
Mhm.
10,000 square foot house was never supposed to cost $2 million.
Yeah.
And since that guy did it and this guy did it, it's like now that's the comp. It's like, okay, can we go back and just see, like, out of everyone that helped build that house for $2 million, did anyone make money?
Yeah.
Is are any
Right?
of those are any of those trades still in business? Now imagine if we qualified, like, the cost of construction against, like, if it was successful. And I
Never
have
thought
this
of that.
I've had the same gripe about magazines. And we I'm going to be careful because um I had this project that we were supposed to build, and we started the project. We were through demo, and we got yanked. And I was like, "What the hell? Like, this is our job." And long story short, we had put the price together. Fixed. It was a fixed cost at the time, and the architect essentially, you know, communicated that the budget was going to be one number and we were double it, and was so embarrassed by our number that never showed the client our number, and found a GC that agreed to do it for the price he said it would cost, and then was the hero and brought that in. And
Wait, you had signed a contract with the client?
we had a con it's a little complicated.
Okay, yeah, you don't need to
But
get into
but
details.
no, I will, because everyone listening is like, "Nick, like, at least give some clarity." We signed a contract to do the demo, and while we were pricing the rest of the job, and if
Got
we
it.
did it, and ultimately it was supposed to be our job as long as the demo went well. Demo went great, and then, like, I was the it was the last day I was on the site. I had a man lift on the whatever floor I was. It was in a condo building, and I got the phone call while I was cleaning up the last day, and they were like, "Yeah, they decided to go with another builder," which was all bogus. It was all bullshit, and I was so frustrated. I was like, "Fuck this! I'm leaving the man lift, and they can deal with it." Ultimately, I didn't, and I got it out of there. But I was just like, I was so upset about it. My point is that project went on, was supposed to be done in like less than a year, went on for 3 years, was an absolute nightmare. They called me 3 years later, had me go look at the job to see if I could fix the things that got done wrong. And for a number of reasons, which I won't speak about, I declined to do that. And I was like,
Yeah.
I'm all set. I'm all set. But then it went on to win awards, be published everywhere, be this massively successful project. And I'm like, there's no fact checking to this. It's like the guy that did that job is out of business. The client didn't get what he paid for. The level of quality is has been now photoshopped to death to make it look the way it should be. And the architect has this, like, now, like, successful project under its belt. It's like, that's not fair. And it's like, that's what I mean. It's like the same thing with these comps. It's like, you're basing like, the value of that project on, the end result, rather than like, who paid for what? Like, what blood was shed in order to pull that off?
Yeah, I've never thought of it that way. I'm always thinking it's like, the problem with this industry is, and it's really hard to sell your value as a GC,
Mm,
because usually it's a one time, with the client. Period.
mm,
It's very rare there's a repeat business with this world of construction, unless you get in with developers
yeah.
or spec builders, and
Mhm.
it's because your client, you can sell them your value, that the fact that we do our schedules, we have our quality, we have our OAC meetings, we have our communication levels, whatever you're selling to that client. They're going to come back and say, well, this architect said that you were double the price, so we're going with this guy. It's like, and like you said, like, well, is there any fact checking? What has this guy done before? Like, what is this guy providing? Has he accounted for all these things in the building that weren't in the drawings that are going to have to be redone, or whatever the situation is? And then they go through that whole situation 3 years later, and they're calling you for help, and it's like, told you so. But it's too late at that point. You can't.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, we'll go with you on the next one. Like, if I buy a T-shirt or a dinner that's terrible, I'm not going back there again.
Yeah.
And they're not going to get my business again. But with a house, you're like, well, I just put in $2 million in this house. That's all the money me and my wife have. We've saved up our whole life savings for this. Like, that's it. And then what a terrible experience we had. And but it's so hard to sell that value as a contractor. And I think that's why a lot of people get in trouble because yeah, that fact check doesn't exist, and the individual is selling a bill of goods that they haven't even fact checked themselves.
I have 2 points on that. The what I think we miss when we're selling work, and this is like sales 101, is that oftentimes when like, all right, I got to sell the value. And I think about, like, for us, it's like, well, our communication style, it's like, hey, when you work with us, you're going to get a site super and a project manager on the job dedicated to your job. And it's like, and that's so we can make sure, like, we keep track of our numbers, and we're keeping track of documentation, and we're getting thorough daily logs. And clients like, I don't give a shit about that, because all I'm saying is, like, why I want to have people on site. So I'm getting all this information, like, that we have the information, where it's like we phrase these things in a way that, hey, you're going to get this, and this is how it benefits me. It's like, flip that, and you like, what's the value to them? And we so often, like, forget that, like, the whole point of selling is to provide value to who's paying for that. Where it's like, hey, I understand that communication is really important to you. So, what I think would be really beneficial is that if you get information delivered to you every single day in a form of a daily log, is that something that would make sense to you? It's like, oh yeah, I live out of state. The fact that I could check in on construction every day, that would be amazing. It's like, and what we could also do is we could also make sure that that budget's updated daily. That way, when you plug in, you know where you're financially sitting on this job. Would that be helpful to you? Absolutely. It's like, all right, well, what we can do is we can assign a PM to this job to manage the financials, and we can also assign a super. Does that, and those guys will do XYZ, and you'll make sure you'll have that information. Does that sound good? Yeah. It's like, okay, so that's how we're going to structure the job. So you're
Yep.
you're selling the benefit to them. And,
Hmm.
and like, for what it's worth, like, that's a cheesy example, but the point of it is that's what we miss. We constantly sell the value as to, like, why is this good for me as a builder? It's like, oh
Yep.
well, why is your fee 20%, the other guy's 15? It's like, well, the other guy, he does a shit job, and I'm going to do a better job, and you're working with a bigger company, and we have more overhead. Like, okay, cool. I don't care about how much overhead you have.
Yeah.
That
That's
guy's
$200,000 out of my pocket that I'm
Yeah.
giving to you.
So give me a reason as to why me spending $200,000 more money is going to benefit this project for my sake. The good.
No, yeah, you're 100% right, and I've never kind of thought like that way. And it's all as you're saying it, it's also your insurance policy as an owner. Like this is there's going to be things missed in the design review. There's going
Mhm.
to be things missed in the coordination between the engineer and the architect. And us having that super there, us having that PM there, that is going to be things that we can catch ahead of time and make sure that if you don't want to pay that, you may pay $200,000 in rework or redesign or extra added steel or whatever the situation is because it's the inevitable that we're going to see something in the drawings that was missed. There's no perfect build, and so this is your insurance policy on that, and wording that in a way that benefits them is definitely something that we lack in that sales process.
Yeah, it's just, it's with everything. It's like, why, and anything we're buying, like, we want it to be a value to us or a deal to us. Like, people want to make sure that they're getting a good deal. Doesn't mean that they want the best price. It's just like, what's the deal? Like,
Hmm.
why am I spending more money? Like, what's the value to it? You're buying one car over the other. It's like, well, both of them are going to get you from point A to point B. It's like, yeah, but that one gets me there faster. It's like, well, you kind of have to drive the speed limit. It's like,
Hmm.
or it's like, well, but that one is, it's it fulfills my passion in terms of, like, high quality Italian cars. It's like, oh, well, there's the value. Like, that's why you'd go buy a Ferrari. You're not buying a Ferrari because it's going to get you to your destination differently.
Hmm.
If you technically it's different, but the point is, it's still a car and it's still an automobile. It's like, what's the value to that? And that value, like, and that's what, to further this, is like, you have to understand what the client is looking for. Some clients, care about the schedule, or some clients care about the budget. It's like, well, what's more important to them? And if they're communicating, and that's where like you got to ask those questions up front. It's like, hey, listen, you know, I only have $2 million. My wife and I, have saved up our life savings to build this house, and it's really important that we stay on budget. Great. Frame the entire conversation around that. It's like, you know what? It's very clear, like, hey, that $2 million, that's our North Star on this project. That is the constraint that we need to pay attention to. And what I find is important is that we have someone dedicated to paying attention to the budget of the project, and monitoring that on a daily basis to make sure that every one of these line items that we've priced out 12 months in advance, that we're tracking against that, and that way we know where we stand at all times and there's no ambiguity.
100%. I mean, building a house is an emotional process for anyone. And
Hmm.
I don't know if this is true. I heard it's like one of the top two most stressful things you can voluntarily put yourself through next to divorce. And
Oh man,
like
I've
you
never heard
obviously
that.
can't voluntarily put
Yeah.
yourself through like a sickness or something, but like something that it's that high up there as far as it's just super stressful. There's a lot of money, there's a lot of decisions, there's a lot
Mm,
of just a lot of emotion. And so, like you said, if you can frame that conversation around like, what are you stressed about? What are your concerns? And here's how we're going to help you
mm,
alleviate that and make sure that you feel safe with this company because we guarantee that we will do X because that is your hot button.
mm.
That's going to be our main focus for you and this client because every client's going to be different and every client's going to be emotional. That's just the fact.
It's funny. I went to an event similar to Hermosi, but it was a different group. Um, and one of the things we talked about during that process was video sales letters. And it's one of I have the book somewhere of my notes. I'm not a note taker, but similar to you, I just was jotting notes this whole day. Um, and the video sales letter basically walked. I think if you Google it, it will pull up a framework, but it basically walks through like a conversation that you would have with a potential client, hearing like, basically repeating back what their fantasy is, answering the objections, repeating that fantasy, and then essentially inserting you into the solution of what they're looking for. And I'm doing a poor job explaining it, but for an example, it's like, asking the question. It's like, well, wouldn't it be great if you lived in a home that your adult kids wanted to come back to? It's like, well, now the client's like, yeah, that's what I want. Like, because you listen to them. It's like, and wouldn't it be great if that home was super energy efficient, had no natural gas in it, and could endure the elements of the Northeast? Yeah, that would sound great. And and it's probably pretty important that the project like that stays on budget, because what we don't want is that beautiful home to be over budget and behind schedule. So you really want to probably work with someone that has a really structured process in building a home, and can kind of really project those things out. Well, yeah, that would be really important. It's like, well, guess what?
Yeah.
We can do that, and here's our system. And when they had walked through that, I know people are gonna DM me and ask, like, can you send a picture of that? I will pull it up in my book and I'll share it on social media at some point. But when they walk through, I'm like, holy shit, like that's the conversation that you're supposed to be having with the client. Is because
Hmm.
what happens is, like, you bring them through this, like,
It's
it's a
essentially a sales funnel.
yeah, I mean, a funnel, like I was gonna say, like this mind journey, which sounds
Well, it's
lame,
an
but
emotional funnel, we'll call it.
yeah,
You're
and
walking
just
down,
like
yes, 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 and then all of a sudden they're like, "You're the guy."
right. And it's not, I mean, the point of it is to, like, for them to understand, like, that you understand, you're listening and you understand what they want. The other point I was gonna make about this being an emotional thing is that's the other issue I have with the industry, in the sense that it is so emotional that when it goes wrong, it becomes so fatiguing. Is that a word? So
I don't know.
fatiguing?
I'm not the
Yeah.
right guy to ask for that.
You become so fatigued with the process of it being wrong, that whether you finish the job or you fire the builder, that's the end of it. There's no follow-up to the reputation of, like, "Hey, that builder fucked me," or "That builder did a shit job." It was just like, I can't even talk about it. I'm so fatigued, like, this is so stressful." And that builder goes on to do it again.
Yep.
And it's, where, like, your reference to the restaurant earlier, it's, you get the angry yelpers. where they get on and like, my chicken tenders were, undercooked, and my son got sick, and it's like,
Mhm.
and then you're hopping on Yelp when you're trying to book you know a night out, and you're the first thing you see is this 1-star review, and you're like,
Mhm.
what's going on? And then it's like, oh, holy shit, there's all these 1-star reviews. We can't go here. And but we don't have that for builders. It's like you're lucky if you're going to read through some Google reviews. And at that point, like, most of the time the Google reviews are humorous,
Yeah, you're right.
or you can't even fact check them. It's like, you know, it's like, how are you, I'm speaking from a client's perspective, right? It's, there's some builders in Boston here that, people ask me all the time, like, hey, we're going to go with this builder. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I know the 3 jobs
Yeah.
that they've been thrown off of. So
I mean,
I'm not
a friend of
sure how
mine,
you'd want to go for it.
yeah, a friend of mine's a very successful builder out here, and he's building 10 to 14 million dollar homes, and they do a very good job. And he started a side business of consulting for clients. And there's a
Mhm.
builder in the neighborhood that we're building in, and he has 4 or 5 houses, and these houses have stood in the framing stage for 2 years now. And
What?
I called my friend, and I was like, aren't you representing these guys? What's going on? He's like, yeah, the guy asked for money up front at certain stages, and when he got to when he's done with the framing stage, he asked for the rough-in phase money. So he blocked his draws out in like chunks, and he's like, yeah, every phase I'm gonna ask for whatever $300,000 to get me to the next phase. And he's just dipped. He owes everyone money, and he's like in Mexico. No one can find him, and he has 4 multi-million-dollar homes sitting framed for 2 years, and no one can find him. No one, and it's just like, and then he starts digging projects. So he owns a bunch of land too. So he's building these spec houses too, and so he's just starting to slowly start breaking ground in these new homes. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, and it's wild how this industry can kind of take people for that ride. But one other side note, I was thinking, a friend of mine, he lives in Florida, and he's an attorney, and he's an attorney friend that built a house, and I guess the contractor just did a shit job, and so he, like you said, like, you can't really review it. It's this, he was emotional and he was
Mhm.
fatigued, but he didn't know how he could like get this guy, so he just went on and said like, so he got the name like nsbuildersreviews.com, and then and he pays the Google ads for it, so it's the top ad up there. And so when anybody Googles this guy's company, his review is like this like 2-page document of everything that happened to him at the top of Google, and that's how he's got the guy. I don't know if it works or not, but
I don't know if it works either, but I feel like that should not be on this podcast. I feel like people are gonna hear that and be like, "I have so many ideas." I'm gonna
well, yeah, touche. But hopefully it's just builders, not clients.
Yeah, fair. I mean, it's the
But
same
yeah, I
thing,
mean,
like, well, flip that around too. It's like, they were, I forget, I think it was an early podcast we had. It's like, we were, it's like clients. It's like, how are you fact checking a client? One of the things that came up in one of our Build 20s was, hey, does anyone have a clause in their contract that they can verify that a client has the funds to build? And like, I would say 15 out of 20 people, yeah, we have that in our contract. Great. Follow-up question. Has anyone exercised it? 0 people have exercised that. It's like, what do you have it in your contract that you can verify that they have the funds to build this, but then what are you asking for? It's like, can you provide me a bank statement showing that you have $6 million in the account?
or a
It's
credit
like,
check just to see if they
or a
pay their
credit,
bills on
yeah.
time.
Yeah, and we don't. And that's just like that first layer. And I think
Yeah,
that's where, like, there's so much talk in like the consulting side of our business is like, make sure you have a deposit, make sure you hold that, don't ever fund the job, don't finance the job, don't use your own money to pay for stuff, make sure you're invoicing the client ahead of ordering, like, and what happens is it becomes a very complicated accounting, process, and you think to this guy, like, in your neighborhood, it's like, yeah, this guy's taking a ton of money up front, and he essentially is putting himself in a position where he should be able to cash flow comfortably. And then he's got a couple $1,000,000 in the bank. He's like, you know what? I'm gonna dip out. I'm gonna go to
yeah,
Mexico.
and I think he's using that money to fund his spec houses down the street, and so
Wait,
like
he's
those.
he's in Mexico and still building?
So like, and it's weird. It's kind of crazy. Like, yeah, because we have a lot of homes in this neighborhood, and so like I'm always just walking, seeing who the job signs and who people are. I'm
Yeah.
always vetting stuff and seeing who does good work, and um, Yeah, you'll just see like a shovel go in the ground. They just start digging a hole, and you're like, "No way, he's going on this house." And then, and then he'll pour some footings and some walls, backfill, and then he'll sit for like 6 months, and then all of a sudden he has a frame crew there, and they build it, and then I can't even fathom it. It's and I my biggest thing is I feel so bad for these clients that meet these builders that are
because they
doing
don't
these
know.
types of things.
Yeah, they don't know.
They don't know. And what, like, to your point, like, how can you vet the builder? How can you vet the client? And you can vet the builder a lot easier. I mean, you can
Mhm.
definitely say, give me some past clients of yours. And
Sure.
but it's I just feel so bad for a lot of individuals that get into this industry because it's just, yeah, I mean, back to everything we are saying, these guys are getting beat up on prices. They don't know how to run their business efficiently, and they're just some of them are just not good characters. And it's a real shame that this industry has that reputation.
Yeah, it's frustrating. It's funny when you talk about digging hole, backfilling, and then just sit. There was a pool company near me. I don't know if they're still in business, but years ago, like that was their thing. They take big deposit up front. Excavator would be there the day after the deposit hit the account. They dig the hole, pull the excavator. All right, we'll be back in 6 months. It's like, what? They're like, yeah, we're super behind with getting the pools in, so we're all prepped. It's like, so you just dug a hole so you could collect 50%, and now I
Yep.
have a hole in my backyard for 6 months. And I'm not going to be able to use my pool this summer. It's like, I know we're super backed up, and it's
We
just
have the
like,
same issue with an elevator company here, and elevators are kind of like this monopoly in the sense that obviously there's not a lot of them. Same with pool companies. I
mhm,
mean, at least in
yeah,
Utah, like we don't have a lot of pools in Utah. So,
yeah,
um, but yeah, these elevator companies, they're everyone's like, don't go with this company. So then we call the other two companies, and they're like, oh, we're 3 years out, and so you got to go with this one company. And same thing, we've paid them 90%, and
oh
they were supposed to deliver the project in February, and now they're telling us it's going to be into June. And my client was in town last week, and he's like, "We're going to this place," and I'm talking to him, and like, yeah, we went down there and we gave him a near full, but at the same time, they were like, "What do you want us to do? Like, we're not ready. We
yeah,
don't have the cab," and
right.
they're kind of just holding your money and no schedule, no delivery, and it's crazy that people can just run a business this way.
And what's the most frustrating thing, like for guys like you and I, it's like here we are trying to run a legitimate business,
Hmm.
and we're being judged based on our quote unquote peers that are doing a shit job.
Yeah, and like just the little mistakes that get made, people are hacking on you. You're like, man, if only you knew like how minor it is that I got to tear out this drywall or we had this little
Mhm.
leak or whatever, compared to the guy down the street whose builder bounced on him 2 years ago. Like,
Yeah.
but you can't justify it that way.
It's
It's
like, well,
not
that's
a
why I didn't hire that builder. I hired you
yeah,
because you're supposed to be perfect.
exactly. And so
Right.
it's not a good justification that I would never say to the client. But um, I heard some study about how people are always going to remember how you leave them, and so
Mhm.
like you can be so great up front, you can be so communicative during the dig, the frame, the this, the that, but then during the punch list, if you just like stop answering the phone calls because you get busy and stuff, that's
That's
how they're
it.
going to remember you. And
Yeah.
you could have been flawless for 11 months, and that last month you blew it, and that's your reputation with that client, period. And so as much as it's painful to get that punch list and do all those tedious little things, and answer the annoying phone call of like, my water softener is not working, it's like, I'll be right there.
Mhm.
um, that's what they're going to remember, and that's where your referral is going to come from.
Yeah. It's funny you say that, like, anyone that's listening to this, everyone just had like one project stick in their mind. Like, yeah, I remember that. And we had
Yep.
one. It was like we were dynamite all the way through, and then we started getting close to the end, and we kept pushing the delivery date. And like you could feel like they were on a high. They were like, hey, we want to do we want to do this next part of our house. Let's start talking about it. Let's just finish up, finish this part, and then we'll talk. And it was like we plummeted at the end, and we just didn't like we didn't get to back to home base. And sure enough, they hired like another builder literally a month after we left, because we just and it wasn't anything bad. It was just like we didn't finish on the high note. Like the punch list took a little too long, and there was some like kind of bullshit that we should have probably taken care of in a faster manner, and we didn't. But you're absolutely right. It's how you leave them is going to be what determines the success in that in a refer especially in a referral situation.
Yeah, I mean, what you just said, I mean, I made a post yesterday about like how we're all in this together. Like construction is kind of a universal language as a
Yeah.
contractor. And what you just said, like how everybody can flash back to that project. And I just want like your audience to know that like you're not alone in this journey of
No.
feeling like you're the only one that's making a mistake or your client's mad at you or you've tripped up or you finished the job poorly and you lost the next the next phase of the build because of that. Like, I mean, here's Nick is an established builder that has a reputation, and we're all in this game together. And so it's just, unfortunately, it is the inevitable because you're dealing with nature and uneven territories and different terrains and different clients, different architects, different designs, different subcontractors, and something will be done incorrectly. And it's just part of the game. And that's why we love it and hate it at the same time.
Yeah. It's true. I mean, that's why we started this podcast, is that we would have these conversations, like you and I would be in person talking, and it's like, man, like we got to share this with other people, because
Yeah,
there's people that just simply aren't realize, like, feel alone, like just feel like they're completely alone, and that they're the only one dealing with these issues. That actually brings up a question. you know I don't know how long you've been doing social media, in terms of like the content that you've been putting out most recently,
not long,
but
about a year, maybe.
okay. That's probably when I got first wind of you. I was seeing that you were doing the kind of the flip around style selfie videos, and talking about the process. What where'd that stem from?
Well, like to kind of digress a little. So I just started this podcast called LLC, Lesson Learned Conversations. And my biggest thing on this is, my story is I don't come from a construction background. I worked in the commercial world but like I got into construction at age 35 years old. And so I've only been in construction for 5 years, my entire life. And so like
Mm,
I understand business and stuff and I'm a quick learner, but because of that, I make a lot of mistakes. I'm learning every single day. Like I wasn't a framer growing up. I didn't, like you, I mean, you're a woodworker. Like you understand how to miter these joints and stuff. I don't. I'm not working with tools. Like that's not my
mm,
skill set. And so I'm not the guy to sit down as you're installing the baseboard and figure out how this joint's going to work out. Like but I can help troubleshoot and ask the right questions to maybe get us there. And so I felt that maybe I could just kind of share for the dumbass stuff that I'm doing out there that like people can relate to. And I've started finding that like people are like, man, thanks for like sharing that you made the mistake or you had this leak or that you framed this incorrectly, because I thought I was the only one. And I'm just kind of documenting the process of us learning as I've surrounded myself with a good team of people that can help us build these houses correctly. But um, I'm a student to it, and I just want to kind of share my journey. I guess that's how I started it, because I know there's a lesson to be learned in this whole game every day.
and I mean, I think that's one of the coolest things about social media, is that you can document and share, and it goes along with this podcast, but also like my mindset in terms of, you know when we're thinking about educating and collaborating over competing, it's this coattail effect. And it's exactly what you just said. It's like, you're 5 years into this. So there's a guy that's 4 years into this, trying to figure out how to get to year five. And then there's a guy that's 3 years into it, trying to get to year four. And I think that is, for me, like, when I think about social media and what it's done for our industry, that's the biggest benefit, is it's given the opportunity for everyone to see what's right in front of them, and talk to that guy that's right in front of them. Where traditionally speaking, like, you're learning from people that have, started it, done it, and finished it, and then
Hmm.
turning around to like, hey, let me explain to you how I did it. It's like, that's fine, and but you're gonna remember the good things that worked, and maybe some of the really bad things. But I need to know about the things in between. What are the
Yeah,
little hiccups I'm gonna face? And truthfully, 50 years after it happens, you're just not gonna remember it. And there's more value to you, where it's like you're 5 years in.
yeah. And there's, a couple examples of that of just sharing it, because I ask questions all the time, like where I'm like, hey, we're trying to recess this baseboard, and there's this detail where this ledge comes up, and I really don't know how to finish this. Like, to all my carpenters out there, any suggestions? And I learned from those people. Like, otherwise, and But Matt Reisinger did a video, and I recently posted too, where he had a wall hung toilet and in his own house, and the
Mhm.
cabinet guy on the back end screwed into the tank of that toilet. And Matt was like, I didn't document that there's a wall hung toilet tank right here. Here's a photo. Do not put a screw here. So
Mm.
I saw that. I was like, hell yeah. I was so excited. And because we're hanging a wall hung toilet like a month later, I knew it was in the
Yeah.
specs. I'm like, so we document, we put it on the floor, we spray paint it, like, we're marking it where it's on the drywall,
Yeah.
we're marking it, and then all the way through mudding, we're marking it, and then we prime it and we forget. And lo and behold, the cabinet guy's installing, and I go, "Wait, man!" Like, and I go, "You didn't?" And I look over, and there's a screw, and I go, "Back that out for a second." Cut the drywall right through it, and I'm like, "Here, I learned this lesson, and I documented it, to the whole team." And we still made the fucking same mistake. And it was a tile wall that we had to tear out the tile and pull out the whole carriage. And it ended up being like a $1,200 mistake to our company. And
Wait, 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 wait. Why'd you have to take out the top? You can't replace the tank from the
you
backside?
can't replace the tank. We called Toto. We called the reps. I was like, you have to be able to. So you take out the whole carriage, which was like $800, and
No,
then
I
but there was
know.
a tile wall, so we had to cut out all the tile and retile it.
Side note, that's Toto should fix that. That tank should
Bro,
be able to come right
I was
off.
like, it's a plastic tank, whatever, 18-inch by 18 inch,
What
and
do
I was
they
like, you guys
weld the
tell me I
frame
can't
around it?
pull that out? Yeah, with the frame around it, I had to replace the whole carriage. They don't make those individual components, and it was like I called three reps. I was like, I need to speak to your boss. I was like, like I was like, there has to be a way that you could just mail me the tank. They're like, we don't do it. It comes as one package. So let that be the lesson not to learn. But even though I learned that lesson online, so that's why I think it's so important that if you're out there building, like share your mistakes because
Yeah.
people learn from them, and then my dumbass learns from it and still doesn't make learn the lesson. But um, yeah, I don't know. I've just started the social media game. I like it. It's hard. Like I don't particularly like putting myself out there on camera and documenting this stuff, but I'm sure you're seeing the reward of like just
Yeah.
someone being like, "Man, I've followed you for years," and not that people are saying that to me yet, but like when someone comes to me and is like, "Hey, you're really helping me in my journey," or "I appreciate that," like it feels good and it makes me feel like I'm on the right path of trying and attempting to provide value to people.
I mean, I'll give you kudos. Like ever since I've followed you. I love the content you put out. I think it's super cool that you're just, hey, this is straight to the point. This is what I'm up to. This is what's going on. Like, here's what I'm facing. And anyone that follows you, I'm sure feels that way. And I actually just pulled your account up because I was like, uh, for some reason, I thought you had. I mean, you got 1,800 followers. I would have
Yeah,
thought that you had like 100,000 followers based on the way that you put content out.
thanks, man.
And honestly, like I just think it's really valuable. And I noticed I didn't notice it before, but I noticed that you had these templates. So
Hmm.
I'm curious because 2 weeks ago we had Eric from 30 by 40, and we talked a lot about these like templates and email funnels and things like that. Is what's the intent behind providing these templates? Because obviously you're building an email list.
Yeah,
Um,
I've done an email lesson. Like I kind of on the Hormozy theme. Like, he's like, I mean, ultimately, like I really enjoy helping people, and I think
mhm,
that there's like what you guys are doing with your seminars and stuff. I don't know what my ultimate goal with it is, but I do think that as I grow in this journey, if
mhm,
in 10 years, I'll have a lot of value to bring and maybe I can provide value to other people. And so along the Hormozy method is like, just keep giving shit away for free for the next 10 years.
yeah,
People will come to you eventually and ask you if you have something to sell them. And so I'm just kind of like, the
you're
more
getting a
people I
jump
talk to,
start
the
on
more,
it.
yeah, I'm just kind of like, it as simple as a basic spreadsheet is to bid a job. That's a smart spreadsheet that like is so simple and basic to me.
Mhm,
Someone else is doing it on a notepad, and that might be of value to them. And if I can just give someone a little schedule or proposal type thing, yeah, that's all I'm trying to do is just build an audience and deliver some decent free content.
yeah, I mean it's smart. I mean, I think that's a big conversation around what we talked about with Eric. Is just like you're you we everyone has all this stuff. You want to talk about another issue in this industry is that we are all like generally speaking the industry is made up of 1 2 man shows. Like that's the majority of these operations. They're small companies and everyone starts and builds it from scratch. No one's using the same estimate sheet. No one's using the same accounting process. No one,
Hmm.
like everyone's using a different process for every part of their business. Where it's like, big part of what we're doing here, podcast, the brand, some other things that we have in the works is that we want to help, centralize that. Where it's like, hey, if everyone is operating kind of the same way, then it becomes a more even playing field. And here I'm going to dip into AI for a second. Uh, did you go to the Builder Show? Were you in Vegas?
No.
So there was just, I mean, it was AI overload on the software floor. Like everything was AI, and there was a lot of it had to do with design and takeoffs and things like that. But what I had a conversation with someone. I was like, what's going to be really interesting is that in within the next 3 years, not only will the takeoffs and stuff be automated, but we're gonna get to a point where, you know, we can do a takeoff and we can write a scope sheet and we can get pricing for materials and labor. And essentially, when you price a job and I price a job, it's gonna be line for line. We're gonna be paying the same for material, paying the same for labor within reason. Like, yeah, maybe you get better rates at your lumberyard, right? But it's going to create more of an apples to apples comparison because the information is going to live in a place that we all have access to. And what will be the differentiator will be the way I present my proposal, who I am, my personality, the way I manage my job. I staff it with a PM and a super. Oh, well, David only has a super, and I don't value the PM as much.
Hmm.
And it's going like, and that I'm excited for because I think what will right now, this competitive market that we're in is that a lot of times these clients are banking on what you forget.
Yep.
It's like, hey, we just priced a job recently. We were $9,100,000, and we didn't get the job. We were the most expensive. We didn't get the job for a couple different reasons, um, which were all valid. But then the other three contractors, there was a spread of up to $2.5 million. I was like, what?
Whoa.
It's like, oh yeah, the lower guy was like 6.5 million. I'm like, and thankfully they didn't get the job, because I would have felt terrible. I'm like, that guy forgot something
Something. Yeah.
like times 30, you know? And that, but that's frustrating because like a lot of clients will look at it, like especially new clients. It's like, oh, this guy's 6.5 million. Like he runs a leaner operation, or he's a chuck in a truck. Like we don't need a super or a PM. It's like, let's take advantage of the fact that he has low overhead. It's like, well, not only does he have low overhead, but he also has, an inaccurate proposal that very likely you're going to end up paying for. And that's going to be a frustrating experience. And, and it's going back to your point a couple minutes ago, is like, this is where the value comes in and selling the value. And it's sometimes hard to sell the value of like, hey, building with us is going to be a better experience. And it's similar to, when I talk about pre-construction, it's like, hey, pay us $50,000 for pre-construction. Because if you pay us $50,000 to work through pre-construction, I can guarantee that you're gonna save more money than if we don't do this. I'm sorry. I can guarantee that if we don't do this, it's gonna cost you more than 50 grand in the end of the job. And it's
Whoa, whoa. Unpack that really quick. So
yeah,
you're charging $50,000 for pre-construction?
yes. Let me unpack. I will unpack that because
Okay.
I'm sure people are like, what do you 50 grand?
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not. I have a couple things to unpack. Now I'm being interviewed. Um, We do our pre-construction agreement is we bill, it's a retainer. So we're billing monthly against that retainer. So we estimate how many hours we're going to spend in pre-construction. Pre-construction is more than just pricing the job. We say, like, the way I explain it, it's we're building the job on paper. So we're going through schematic pricing, design development pricing, CD pricing, doing a project schedule, like really like getting to a point where if when we're done with pre-construction, we should be able to start construction and have all the answers. So we're just, whoever's working on that project, PM, a senior PM, my operations manager, all of anyone that's working on it bills against at an hourly rate that's set in that agreement. and we just bill against it each month. We send out a statement, hey, 50 grand minus $10,000, and this is how we got, these are the hours we attributed it. This is where we're at in the process. So they know that we're drawing down on that.
Hmm.
My example, what I was getting at is when we're, what's hard is like, hey, if you pay 50 grand up front for pre-construction, the project will end up costing you less than if you don't do pre-construction. And the reason that that's hard to sell is like, well, you're never going to have a A/B test. So it would be like if, hey, let's do this, right? Let's do pre-construction and we'll get all the way to the end of the project and say it's a $5 million job. It was $5 million like all in. All right, now good. Let's do this again, but let's skip pre-construction and watch what happens. Okay,
Hmm.
well, you end up at $5.5 million. It's like, see the difference? It's like, well, no one's ever gonna do both.
Yeah, of
So,
course.
and that's what I'm getting at. It's like it's hard to sell the value because you're comparing an outcome of something that you're essentially like forecasting, like, hey, if you don't work with us, or if you don't work with a dedicated site super on a job, like the project's gonna go awry and you're not gonna have a point, like you're not gonna have that point contact, and like the job won't go well. It's like, well, why won't it go well? It's like, well, you don't have a super. It's like, well, what if everything's figured out and the guy, the chuck in the truck is a dynamite, builder, and he just gets on site and he gets it done. Because those guys exist.
Hmm.
You don't need a commercially ran uh, building company. Like that guy might build a better house than me and charge half the amount of money.
Yep,
That exists.
for sure.
So going back, it's like this AI thing. I think will start leveling the playing field, and then what it will come down to is that we will be competing for like who they want to work with based on who we are, and we try to avoid bidding work, but in one of the scenarios that we did bid work, they were like, "Hey, we don't want you to price the job. We just want you to put together how you would manage this job and your estimated general conditions for the project."
Oh, that's a
Every
dream client.
And they were like, and everything else, like we know that all of the divisions, it's the labor, the material, like it is what it is. I just want to understand like how you're going to manage it and how he's going to manage it, and then we'll decide like based on that. I was like, that's what you should be comparing, not the
I love
overall
that.
price.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, I mean, it's so hard to say to someone like, "You're right," but that few $100,000 or few $1 million is a lot of money, and
Mhm.
some people have a number. Everyone has a number, and
Yeah.
so I've never even thought about that AI comparison. And it's as you were talking about that story, my old employer, it was $1 billion construction company, and this is one of the largest in Utah. But I was a part of the business development team for a little bit, and um, yeah, it's you. I was like, man, it's so universal because I remember a couple projects we were bidding for, sports stadiums, and it was, I mean, we were the high one, and we were $19 million higher than the low guy. And like, where do you get that kind of spread? But on a $90 million project, that it happens,
Yeah.
and so it's universal. So yeah, that's something I didn't think about, AI bringing that. And so you've seen that the AI is going to scrub that's going to be like a plan Swift kind of that just scrubs and does all the takeoffs for us and gives us the same numbers to bid off.
I mean, I think that's where it's trending. Like we're already seeing AI take off software where, right now, like I go in, we use Stack, cloud based takeoff, and I'm going in, I'm like outlining a room and then saying, all right, that's wood floor. And then, and you can build assemblies. I use it at like an elementary level. Like I'm enough to get my information. I know if I didn't have other jobs, I could just build an assembly and be super efficient at it. But now they have software where it's like you're just clicking and it's like, all right, and AI is saying, okay, yep, got the outline of the room. What is this? Wood floor, okay, and it's automatically capturing these spaces and building these assemblies. I'm forecasting what my thoughts are in terms of like how this will continue to evolve, because I mean I use AI every day, like ChatGPT, and like
Yeah,
understanding
same.
like how to communicate more effectively, how to set expectations. Like, it's literally it's open on my computer right now. It's constantly open because I'm always referring back to it.
Same.
Um, and but I think about like the power of it, and how it's allowed me to understand information faster, And, and yeah, I think that when there will be a point where, you'll be able to upload a set of drawings, just like the architects are using their architects are going to be using it to get rid of the monotonous tasks where it's like they're spending all this time drawing sections and wall sections and details. It's like, let them be creative and be super creative and focus on the creative, and then let AI take that and like pump out information like, hey, this is the wall section. Here's what you need to know, because that's what it will do, is it take the monotony out of it. And I made this reference the other day. The AI to architects is what the CNC is to cabinet makers.
I don't know what
The
the
cat
CNC is.
A CNC is a computer. I don't know what it stands for, but it's
Oh,
the
okay. Yeah, I got you. All right. Yeah, yeah,
the,
yeah.
the router. So like they're
Yes.
cutting all the boxes on a CNC machine where they're
Yep.
just pumping plywood in. It used to be a table saw. It used to be a skill saw. It used to be a hand saw. So now you're just like, now these things are auto feed. You put a pile of plywood next to it. A robot picks it up, puts a plywood down, cuts a box out, pushes it off, gets the next one. And now
It's a
what
great
happens
comparison.
is now the cabinet makers get to be more creative and focus on the hand stuff, the hand work, working on the face frames and the doors and the intricacies. And because the CNC is doing something that is monotonous, now I get to focus and be a little bit more creative. Architects, same thing. But what's going to happen is that with the ability to implement AI in architecture, you're going to get more detailed. You're going to get more of the details, and these plan sets will be more robust, as they should be. Not You shouldn't be building a house off 6 pages of drawings. You should have a lot more than that, especially with the complicated architecture we build today.
Hmm.
And because we're going to get more information and more accurate information, because it's going to be data driven, that's going to be provided to us. And then from our side of it, it will eventually evolve to the fact that like, hey, these drawings are so complete that AI will be able to understand what it's looking at and be able to extract data from it. It's like, hey, based on the drawing set, every room is specced out with 6-inch quarter sawn white oak floors. It says right on sheet 401, and we've done the takeoff, and based on that, you have 1,872 linear square feet of floor.
Wow,
And
you literally just got me so excited for the future of building.
Totally, and but what and like, this is what I'm most excited about, is that and this is where Mike Rowe and I kind of got into it, is that, you know, the argument in his podcast was like, I was talking about it in the way that you are reducing, the hard work, and I did a poor job explaining that, because in one way you're getting rid of the uncomfortable hard work, but there's a value to that, and, like, and you hear that in the culture today, where it's like, it's good to do hard things, like jump in an ice bath. Yeah, it sucks, but it's good for your health. Go work out every day. Yeah, it sucks, but it's good for you. Eat healthy. Yeah, the food's like whatever. Like, there's a lot of like, do hard things. It's good for you. In building, we're already facing hard things. We don't have enough people. We don't have enough people being able to replace the 1 in 5 that we talked about. So it's like, yeah, sure, we want to train these guys. Yeah, we wish that our parents' generation was training our generation and our kids' generation to replace them. It's not going to happen. So how do you make construction more efficient? It's like, well, if you really wanted to, you would stop making architecture as complicated as it is and go back to simpler homes, and then just completely, build efficiency around that. But homes aren't simple anymore. We're not, no one's really building 20-foot by 20 foot by 32-foot cape houses anymore.
Hmm.
That doesn't exist. It's like everyone's building something more complex.
Well,
So
everything is custom. Everything is
everything is custom.
specific to each project.
Right. So you think about AI, you think about offsite construction, you think about robotics. There's a company here in Massachusetts that just opened up. They literally bought one robot, and it sits in a warehouse, and it reaches over, picks up a 2x4, puts it on a template, one at a time, just like an arm would, and basically gets all the studs, makes sure the layout's there, clamps it down, and nails it off. Takes that panel off, puts it down, puts another wall up. Works 24/7,
Wow.
and it's one robot. And it's because someone took the time to understand, like, hey, if we can build the software to understand how to read a plan set, lay out stud, nail it together, and create wall panels, why couldn't we just do that and hit copy paste? And that's what we're going to see over the next 3 5 years is like, how do we pull the monotony out of building? And it will be, and it will just, it will start trickling down further and further. And you're going to see, like, I've already seen it in like commercial construction. I'll make one more example, and I want you to say what you're going to say. But in commercial construction, 11 years ago, we were building a high rise, and every floor, each unit, all of the electrical wiring came in a box. It came in like a wiring harness, like a car would. They open the box up, they pull all the Romex out, and it was literally fully wired for the whole unit. You just pulled it down back through the wall. You put it up in the ceiling and pulled all the branches down. And then you just plugged in the outlets and you were done. Plumbing, every floor, all of the in-wall valves were all pre-manufactured in a factory. They took them, they mounted them to the wall, they set the height, and then they just piped to the next floor, and everything was pre-made. Went to Switzerland, they're building CLT multifamilies, same thing. The entire bathroom wall was a unistrut wall that they wheeled in, they put it on the floor, anchored it to the floor, anchored it to the ceiling, sink, toilet, shower valves, all done.
Shut up.
All done. And that
Really?
and it's not like oh, you're taking the craft out of it. No, I'm not. I'm
There's a guy
putting
in the
it
factory that's
in a
doing that correctly.
yeah,
And then,
and
yeah,
eventually that guy in the factory is gonna retire and a robot will replace him because there's not enough guys to replace that guy, and that's just the reality of it. Sure, you wanna go train five kids to be a plumber? Go for it. We need millions of them. And we have to be on this parallel path of like encouraging AI, encouraging technology, and encouraging people to be in the trade. And the way that you encourage people to be in the trade is by allowing them to do the stuff that is interesting to them, not the monotonous, you know, part A, part B, part A, part B all day.
why do you think it is that this industry is so far? Why do we take so long to adapt to this? Because I've never even heard of this stuff. And granted, you're more on the forefront of like talking with individuals, with
Mm.
your social presence and stuff. You're getting the opportunity to go visit and see these types of things. But like these are things that haven't entered my world yet. And so do you think it? I mean, I can fully understand and see from like the plan document, scrubbing the drawings. That's such an easy integration into an office software that you can be at your desk and it's just doing it for you. But to take it out of the field is a different level, and then training the individuals and letting them know like, hey, we're going to replace you with this company that is doing this if you don't get on board. Why do you think we're so slow to do that?
I don't know. I
I don't.
actually
Yeah.
don't. I don't. But statistically, it's like I think we're the slowest innovating industry.
Oh,
Period.
easy. That and the
And
education industry.
yeah, and like there was a reference to farming. You know how far farming has come? The technology that farming has is like that,
Oh, you just
all of
turn on
that.
the tractor and it just goes.
There's no one in the tractor.
Yeah.
And there's a weed on the ground and the thing zaps it. It's like done. And it's crazy to think, because if you think of like, if you were to ask someone like, "Hey, what's more rural?" Like construct, like building a house or farming, your brain would immediately go to farming, or at least mine does. It's like, no, like farming is way advanced in terms of technology and innovation and robotics and even AI. Where it's like construction, just it's maybe the reason is because of how, like, if you think of how many people are involved,
Yeah.
it's so, like, there's so much human touch
And it's a
where
little less repeatable. Like farming, you can go
yeah,
up and
sure.
down, plant the same where every bedroom is different, every tile is
It,
different,
it
every joint's different.
it's less repeatable when you think of it in the individual pieces. But if you were to like compartmentalize or productize certain things like the bathroom wall, where it's like, if you really think about it, let's do an exercise, right? Think about the bathroom wall. It's like there's 5,000 shower valves you can use. There's 500 different toilets. The sink could be custom made out of concrete. All, like, whatever. All of these things are truly exist. But ultimately, you have a faucet, a sink, a drain, a couple water stubs, a toilet with a water stub, a shower valve, a shower head, maybe a tub. Yeah, there's thousands of product SKUs for that. But that's like we have those things. So why wouldn't you be able to decide, hey, you're going to select this shower valve and that toilet, and then all of a sudden build a wall in a factory or in a shop that has all that stuff already like mounted on it. And then when that building's going up, just take that wall and place it in, and now you're done. Like why are we bringing raw material to a job site and then deciding how it gets cut and put together?
I think it comes down to that human factor as well. Not only are there 100 people that are touching the job, but there's also that owner and the architect and that designer that are
And
like,
the
well,
junior architect and the
yeah.
drafter and the outsourced shop drawing manager and
And I
it
mean,
would it would be
we have a job
interesting.
right now where the cabinets are in and they're like, "Hey, when are we going to be done?" I'm like, "Hey, remember that email I sent you 3 weeks ago? I need these slab selections." Yeah, I'm like, "Still don't have them."
Yeah.
And we're 12 months into this job and you haven't given me slab selections.
And you
And
know what
I here's
that's you know what
15 emails I've asked you for them.
that's you pulling the fire alarm. So then they go into fire alarm reaction mode, and then they go answer your email. And it's like, now why aren't we done? It's like, what? You just approved them. It's like, now I
Yeah.
got to release the fabricator.
Mhm.
And now I got to approve the stone layout. It's I think that I would chalk it up to the fact that there's so much human touch to what we're doing, and it'd be interesting. It would be interesting to track like truly how many human beings it takes to build a house. I mean, like everyone.
Oh, I've thought about that a lot.
Like even just from a construction standpoint, it's like the moment the construction, like the first time that dump truck pulls up, all right, dump truck driver, excavator operator,
Yep.
laborer. There's three. It's like, okay, next day that laborer is gone, but he brings a new one. All right, now four, and it goes and it goes and it goes. It's hundreds,
And that
hundreds.
doesn't even include the individuals that were in the factory gluing that plywood together.
Sure. And
Like
you think about like, all right, well, not only are there hundreds of people putting this together, but then that's 100 different families, 100 different people dealing with emotional issues and depression and financial struggles and a breakup and a hangover, and it's like, why can't we innovate? We can't get out of our own way.
I mean, yeah. I recently heard this from someone that was telling me they're quitting construction, and I was like, "Why? You're the man." And they were like, they said they're going through a divorce, and they said because it's come to my attention that this industry has ruined my marriage, and I'm now realizing that construction is the number one divorce and suicide industry in the world. And
Well, I take
I
back
don't
my
know.
last
I
statement.
didn't fact check that, but this individual was saying that they were on the verge of, not wanting to be part of this world anymore in addition to their divorce, and they were chalking it up to construction. And so it's I mean, you're out in the elements, there's brutal stuff, you're just dealing with all these personalities, all this BS. And um it's just so broken, Nick. And I appreciate people like you that are out there trying to help find ways to make it better, because this industry needs it, man. And I'll be really curious to see how we grow as an industry in the next 50 years. Because at my old company, they're pushing lean pretty hard,
Mhm.
and lean is just such a that's the first time I'd ever heard of lean in general. And here $1 billion company is just getting into it. They're like 2 years into lean,
Yeah.
and and where the manufacturing industry is 100 years into it or whatever
Mhm.
it is. And I'm like, man, if this $1 billion company is just getting into it, you and I, the little guys, like, how long will it take before it hits our plate? And
Yeah.
the efficiencies are just not there, and we're doing it to ourselves. And I'm hopeful that this your comments about AI and stuff can really help change this industry, because we need it for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, my last, kind of reference on that is, we had toured, the Andersen Windows factory, and just seeing, like, how the factory floor works and the use of robotics and just AI, like, just there's things that are scanning, making sure parts are done appropriately
Yeah.
and saying, "Yeah, that was done appropriately." Um, one of actually, second, augmented reality is really interesting to me too, where commercial construction is already adapting it. But I've seen these, basically you can pull out your iPad and remember Pokemon Go. when that
Yeah.
became.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was augmented reality where like
Mhm.
you were seeing stuff like in real time, but they're using that technology for construction where, you're downloading a rebar drawing and you're walking a job site and you're seeing where the rebar is supposed to go and you're walking and looking at that wall. It's like, dude, you're missing two number eights running up this wall. It's like, how do you know that? It's like, because I'm looking at it. It's supposed to be right
Yeah.
there. And that I think is super interesting. And what that's going to do is it will push us to be more forward thinking. I could go on for hours about this, but you know, I think to summarize and to wrap things up here, it's like, I share the excitement that you do that this industry has enormous potential to correct some of the issues that we have brought upon ourselves. But the only way to do that is to encourage this again parallel path of embracing technology and encouraging people to be in this industry and fixing the negative effects of you know mental health. Like that's something that we've talked about on this podcast, and it's some of our most listened to episodes is about mental health. And I too believe that it probably is the highest in suicide and divorce rate for industries because it's fucking brutal.
And
It
there's
can
no
be really tough.
consistency behind it. Like it is mundane. Yep, I'm on to the frame and I'm on to the rough and I'm on, but every day is different. Every personality is different. Every client's different, and it's just an emotional journey. And that's back to what I was just saying. Like um, you know, we're everyone's not alone. We're all in this together. I mean, like it's universal when as we're talking, like, and you're saying, oh, we had these things in the punch list item or this, that, and the bidding. Like I've had that exact same stuff, and someone else listening has too, and we're all going through it together. And so I'm just hopeful that yeah, we can find our way out of this industry because I've only been in it for 5 years, and I'm like, holy shit! I can only imagine someone like you that has been at it for a long time, and the progression you have and have not seen, and what you're looking forward to on the future end of it.
David, I appreciate you making time, man.
Thank you, Nick. I really appreciate the conversation and the work you guys do for this industry.
Likewise. I had your account pulled up. What was your hand? Oh, David James Wintzer.
Yep.
If you want to see the behind the scenes content, and then it's Wintzer, Mark Wintzer, right? Is the
Mark
company?
Windsor Company is the name of
Yeah,
the
and
construction
Mark
company.
and Mark is your buddy, right? That you're in
Mark's my
business
business
with.
partner, and we have a joke that we got married and had a construction baby. So all of our friends
Oh,
give us shit that he took my last name.
that's
But
amazing. David, appreciate
um,
you, man.
thank you, Nick.
And let's absolutely stay in touch. I'd be I'd be curious at what you think about this industry in 5 more years, but we'll talk before then.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, man. I'm looking forward to seeing you at some of those conferences and stuff. So I appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Awesome, of course.
Talk soon.
Yeah, he's you guys got to follow him. Like I said, he is. What did I just have? His David James Wintzer. He's got some cool content. Freeconstructiontemplates.com. Shout him out there. He's got some templates he puts up. But like I said, he shares kind of direct to camera, just what's going on, what he's learning. And I encourage anyone to do that. It's true. Like at the end of the day, there's someone that's a year behind you and just needs to know like how to get to that next year. So it's a perfect example of collaboration over competition. Well, big thank you to our sponsors, Andersen Windows and Buildertrend. And if you haven't already, I know a bunch of you guys actually did sign up for the Contractor Coalition Summit, but head over to contractorscoalitionsummit.com. That is Wednesday, May 15th, all the way through May, is it 19th? Yeah, May 19th is our farewell. But just a little bit of what we got going on as I flip my screen here. On Wednesday, there's an Andersen Windows facility tour. They're a sponsor of the Contractor Coalition year after year, but we're going to be checking out their facility. And then on Thursday, the 16th, we're going to do some home tours with Mark Williams and JCath Design Build. Stoked to do home tours. I think that's one of the coolest things is we get into these awesome cities. We go check out some of the homes that the local builders are building. And then on Thursday, we're going to hang out with Mark Williams, Curious Builder Podcast, myself, Tyler, who is not on this week's episode, but he's going to be there, and as well as Brad from AFT Construction. We're going to be doing a live podcast at the North House in Minneapolis, and then we're going to get into it on Friday and Saturday with a stacked schedule. So you guys have to register. We are going to sell out the event. There's less than half of the seats left. So contractorscoalitionsummit.com. Make sure you grab your ticket. I want to mention, if you need to, we can adjust the payment structure, so you can do a deposit to hold your spot. So just reach out to me personally on Instagram at Nick Schiffer, and I'll get that taken care of for you. See you guys next week.